Jiu-Jitsu reminds me of the Marines. It's like the same structure, right? Like you're doing something tough with other people, you come together, and it just kind of gave me like my warrior spirit back. It filled in discipline in areas where I had lost or I was lacking of. I feel like it gave me like purpose again. Where we get in trouble a lot, like in jiu-jitsu, it's like when we're going too fast and you get caught, or like in data in our work, like we bang out this code or this report and there's mistakes all over it. When you're going too fast is when you make the most mistakes.
Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That always sticks with me, and it's particularly in jiu-jitsu. And I see that in my work too. If I do it really meticulously and right the first time, then I don't have to review it as much. Then I don't have to go back through it, and it becomes so much more seamless overall. This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Abe Diaz. Abe is a Marine Corps veteran with a diverse background in data analytics consulting, financial analysis, recruiting, and supply chain management. Abe is also passionate about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, just like myself, and he embodies the values of discipline, perseverance, and teamwork. He's so passionate about Jiu-Jitsu that he started his own forever project called Substats, all about tracking jiu-jitsu data. In this episode, Abe and I talk about the lessons that he learned from parting ways with the company, what it means to create a forever project, and of course, we talk all about jiu-jitsu and the philosophy there and how it applies to the data domain. I loved talking with Abe. We obviously hit it off around our combat arts, and I'm excited to share this conversation with you all. Abe, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast. We have a lot in common, just loving data, also loving jiu-jitsu, and I'm happy we can come together to sort of talk about the intersection of those two things.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ken. I really appreciate it. Honored to be on the show. Finally, I feel like I made it in life. So if I die tomorrow, I'll die happy, man.
Well, hopefully you'll make it longer than tomorrow. I know we've had enough going back and forth, talking trash in YouTube comments. So we'll have to get on the mat. Not YouTube comments, on LinkedIn comments. So we have to get on the mat at some point. But, we can have at least a little verbal back and forth here as we go through the episode, which I'm super, super excited about. So as I'm sure you know, the first thing I do when I have someone new on the podcast is I like to get to know them through a bit of a story. So I'm interested, how did you first get interested in data? Was there like a pivotal moment, or was it more of a slow progression over time?
I would say a somewhat slow progression over time. I was getting out of the Marines and I wanted to be a financial advisor, so I thought, so that I shadowed a couple for a day. Realized that it was like kind of similar to recruiting when I was just doing like prospecting, making phone calls, and I was just like, I don't want to do all of that all over again, just for something else completely different. And then it was like the first semester of my MBA. One of the classes, it was like ISM something, and like one of the weeks was business intelligence and data analytics. And I was like, that looks pretty cool. What's this? So like that lesson plan for that week was pretty interesting. So were the assignments, and then I signed up for like a Morgan Stanley like veterans and finance seminar, and the chief data officer spoke, and I think he's an Army veteran if he's still there. I see he pulled up a slide and it said wealth data analytics, and I was just like, finance analytics data thing. I meshed the two together. So then once I figured out you can do that or there's something like that, I was just like hopping on LinkedIn, like looking all sorts of finance analytics data. So I say around like October-ish, November-ish 2020, it's when I came into data and I started like doing the things to get involved.
Amazing. Well, first of all, thank you for your service in the Marines. I am interested. I think coming out of the military is a massive life change. That's something where you're like, hey, I was doing this one thing. Now I'm transitioning to whatever it might be. How did you decide, whether it was to go back to school or what route you wanted to take after finishing your service?
Yeah, so I knew I was like done about 8 out of 10 years in. I was doing recruiting. I met my then fiance at the time, and I wasn't like, it's kind of feel bad kind of saying it, but I was kind of like just done with the military. I was like I feel like I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do, but I just didn't feel like that drive to continue on. And I was like at the halfway point where it's like 10 more years you can retire, get a pension. So I was essentially like to some people throwing it all away. But I just like started planning like 2 years out. So this is probably more so for like so any service members, transitioning service members, veterans, retirees that will be listening to this. Like, I planned my transition like early 2 years out. So like I got in debt, I saved money, I did all like the things like the smart things you're supposed to do. But then like I was stuck on like that financial advisor background. So I was like, once I kind of gave that up, like right when I was exiting the military, I was like, what do I do? Right. So a lot of veterans struggle with like identity crisis. It's like, I was doing this thing. I was a Marine, a soldier, airman and I did this for X amount of years. Now I'm in like the civilian world where a lot of the, a lot of things are taken care of in the military. Like, you eat, pay, and when you get out, all those variables, it's pretty much up to you to figure it out. So my plan was just like I need to work and I need to go to school because if I'm not doing something productive, I didn't just want to get out and like screw off and just like not be productive. So work, school, that was like if I did those two things when I got out, like I'd on a good path. And I had the summer to kind of just like figure things out. And then like the beginning August 2020, through networking, I got my first job out of the military, and then I was enrolled in school a couple weeks later. So that was like my plan. I'm sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but
No, no, that was perfect. It seems like, the military is obviously heavily structured.
yeah,
School is a little bit less structured, but there's still structure. And then when you enter the workforce, there's even less structure. And it seems like that's a very logical, well thought out path of going, okay, I recognize that there's going to be a change of life. How do I make it more gradual and also pick up skills and be able to do those things? So I think that's super interesting.
yeah. I was fortunate too because like where I moved to, my wife was already established. We don't have kids, so like my transition is probably a lot easier than other people's. But I was just like two main things: school, work, and then take it from there.
Amazing. Well, I hope you don't mind me digging in a little
Yeah.
bit more. Like when you were first joining the military, what, like why was there interest there? And then, when you were entering the workforce, did you feel that same kind of feeling where you're like, hey, this is something new. I'm excited about it. Because I think joining the military is probably a larger commitment than starting a new job, for example, right? And there's a lot that goes into that. You're not, you're like signing up for something for a relatively long period of time, whereas a job can be transient if you want it to be. And, it's kind of hard to join and then like leave the military
Right.
comparatively. So I'm interested in like what your initial, like, hey, like, why did you want to go do this? And then looking at it afterwards, like, okay, I did this. I'm glad I did it, but now I can sort of transition away.
Yeah. So why I did it, honestly, I was in high school. I knew I wanted. I looking at like my peers in high school. This is probably like a lot of like imposter syndrome 10, 13 years ago. I didn't know the term then, but I was like looking at everyone was like doing the college thing, and like not a lot of my friends were going to school. And I was like, man, I don't know. I don't. I felt like I was too dumb for college at the time. And I just seen like the recruiter guy in school, and I would see like people that graduated before me, and they would come back, and I was like, that's cool. And it was just like I was just drawn to it. Like one of the commercials that got me, it's like these guys were doing random stuff. Like one dude was playing basketball, one dude was in a cornfield, someone was like in corporate America or something, and they all heard like the sound of like the silent drill platoon. I'm sure you may have seen them at some sporting events, but like so they have these old rifles and they do their drilling movements and they make like a sound and a pop. It's called like pop and sticks, and like they heard that sound of like the rifles drilling, and then they all just like ran, and it was like montage. They're at boot camp getting yelled at. People are jumping out of helicopters into water. It was like all this fun things, and I was like, that looks cool. That's what I didn't do any of that cool stuff, but I was like, I want to be a Marine. And then like beginning of my senior year, September 1st, 2009, I went to the military entrance processing station, took the oath of enlistment, Fast forward 9, 10 months later, when I graduated high school, I shipped off to boot camp end of July 2010. Um, now, yeah, that was just that whole experience. I did that whole thing for 10 years, and then getting out as like I was 10 years older. I was 29. Getting out, I had like a much more obviously perspective on life. I was one of those kids that like needed the military. That's like I didn't know what I was doing. I was pretty undisciplined, and I just like I needed the structure to get me going. Because if I didn't do it, then who knows where I'd be. I'm not saying I'd be like in jail or dead or anything, but I just needed that structure and that path. And now transitioning outwards, like leaving, it's like all right, I did this thing. I did the thing. I didn't do everything I wanted to. I didn't get deployed like a lot of my friends did, which is okay. It doesn't shake out that way for everybody. But I did look at me leaving like, all right, I got this new thing I'm gonna do. Leaving the military, I gained all these skills. And also I'd say overall I was like more confidence and excited going into it as well. Like I did this thing. I was a Marine. Cool. I got that. Now what's next? And it's because honestly, I was just like the Marines. It's kind of when you get to a certain point, like I did, it's like which way do I go? Do I keep going? And I'm not really feeling this anymore. It's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. But time to transition to something else. So I was just more excited of like what's new, what's out there after the Marines.
I'd like to take a quick second to thank one of our sponsors, Pathrise. Job hunting can be daunting, particularly in today's unpredictable world. Pathrise matches you with a dedicated mentor in your field to provide tailored support throughout your job search journey. From optimizing your resume and application process to mastering your interview skills, their expert guidance prepares you to secure your dream job and to negotiate a competitive salary. The cherry on top is that you don't pay until you secure that high-paying job that you've been aiming for. Don't hesitate. Visit pathrise.com/KenG to get matched with an expert mentor today. This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z8 workstation. I really love that the Z workstations can come standard with Linux or WSL2, and they can be configured with the Data Science Software Stack Manager. With the Software Stack Manager, you can get right to the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show. I love that. I think so many people get stuck on the sunk cost fallacy, where it's, I've been doing this for 8 years. I have 10 more years to my pension. I have to keep going because I put on all this time. And, there's plenty of ways to make broader careers or pivots that are really, valuable and highly enjoyable for a lot of people. I also think something you said there, it really stuck with me, is that when you were in high school, it was 100% the right thing for you to do to add structure to your life. You don't know where you would be without it. I think a lot of people think that there's a binary answer to every question. Like, should I get a master's degree in data science is a question I see all the time. And the answer is, maybe. It depends on your specific life situation and if it makes sense for you. And I think people lose sight of that. I went back, I did a master's degree in computer science, and I needed the structure of school to be able to learn those things. It was really important for me to have that because I didn't have a clear roadmap at that period of time in my life. If I look at how, my maturity now and the way I understand things, I wouldn't need to do that at this point in my life, right? There's also way better resources now than I had back then available to everyone for free. So it's like, well, it really depends dramatically on the situation, where it's like, okay, if you were as mature as you are now, you can self-guide and regulate and do whatever. The military might not have made sense at that point in time, but we can't look at any of these things without these other factors that are really important for making decisions. And I think it's kind of cool that in retrospect, you can be like, look, like, yeah, I needed that. Maybe now it wouldn't make sense, but like for someone else who needs that structure, it could make sense. For someone else looking to like get into data, like maybe my approach wouldn't work because I have something or I don't have something that they have, which is a very, very powerful thing in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Like hindsight is always 2020, and like I wouldn't change a thing. Like I would do it all. No, I would like to have done more things, but how it all played out, I wouldn't change. Because maybe where I'm at today, or maybe who I am today, and brought me to where I'm at.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's talk a little bit about where you went after your MBA. So, I'm interested in how you landed your first data job. You know,
Yeah.
you worked on some pretty unique projects that I think are neat. So, can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so first data job, I guess like my first real one would be my second job out of the military. I was like a financial reporting analyst at the school where I got my MBA from, Nova Southeastern University. That was pretty basic X Microsoft Excel reporting. So it's like my kind of touching data a little bit. Did some SQL, was going to do some Power BI. I had to move on from that job. And then, well, I guess kind of before that, my first like, it wasn't like a job in data, but I built like a pitch deck in Tableau for this other Marine veteran that I know. I met him at like a military networking event. He said, "Hey, me and my sister run this company called the Chesty, and basically it's like a sports bra for women, and they have like other product lines." So I was like, "Hey, I'm learning this thing called Tableau. You just said you and your sister are looking to raise money, to investors. Can I show you what I'm doing?" And then like a week later, we had a video call. He liked the basic stuff I showed him in Tableau. He sent me some of his data. It was like sales, COGS, headcount, forecasting. And I was like, I had like his live data at the time, and I just built a pitch deck in Tableau, and he used that um, to raise money to investors. Or I mean, I don't know if he ever got anything. I don't think he did, but it was just pretty cool to like, hey, someone. It's a pretty cool story. I like to reflect on, like, barely knowing anything a couple months in. Like, given I had like the military connection, I actually did something. I guess you could say he was a client at the time, and I delivered what he was looking for, which was like a pitch deck that I made out of Tableau. Probably could have done it in PowerPoint, but I was like, oh, let me mess around with it in Tableau.
Yeah. Well, there's something that so many people overlook about that conversation. You said you didn't really know anything, but yet you knew more than these two people and you knew enough that you could create value for them. And I think that that's something that so many people starting in the domain forget is that if you know just a little bit, if you can write 2 lines of code in Python, if you can create a very simple dashboard in Tableau, you know more than 99.9% of the population, like the general population.
Yeah.
And that means that in theory, you can create value for them. And what you did with doing a project, even if it was volunteering, but building out your skill set, that's something that so few people do. It surprises me because that's a way to do real legitimate work. If they say, through their networks that, oh, this guy helped me, you might get a referral. If they raise money and they become a successful company, they might call you back and say, hey, we have a job for you.
Yeah.
There's virtually no downside of doing something like that. Even if you did a terrible job, you just, it's like, okay, well, we learned, I tried, you were doing it for free. So it's not like they're gonna talk bad about you or anything like that. There's
Yeah.
nothing they could do on that front. So it's low risk, high return in the learning and the potential opportunities that come from that. So
Yeah. It was
I think that's such a cool story.
Yeah, it was a definitely cool learning experience. Simple as it was, it definitely was like, I guess, the first initial foray into like having a data job. But fast forward to like my first real data job, I got it through the power of LinkedIn. So last year we moved from Florida to Kansas City. I couldn't keep that financial analyst job because it was working with healthcare data at the school. So just posting on LinkedIn. I don't know if I posted something about Power BI or Tableau dashboard, but one of the founders for my previous company reached out, and he was like, "Hey, we're looking for data analysts." We talked for about a month. I got hired on last August. And I was a data analyst consultant for them. A very small company, only about 12 people total or so at the time, and my that was like doing that was like my first real data job. So what I did, I touched a lot of different things. I mostly did dashboard development. in Power BI for my 9 months there, or however long I was there. I touched some Snowflake. I got to mess around in Rivery and Domo. I did like some basic things in
A
R
lot
and
of tools.
Python. I started learning about Azure. I made one API with some help. So that was pretty cool. Um, and yeah, that was my first real data job. I did that for about 9 months until um, myself and the company decided to part ways. Being that it was a smaller company, they kind of didn't really have enough time for, I guess, training or so. And like they hired me on knowing that I was like, more greener in skills, but my willingness to learn fast and my attitude. But at some point, it just got to where it be like, a lot of the work was a lot more complicated, and I just, not like I couldn't keep up, but I was just like needing a lot of assistance because like I didn't, I have to learn like all these things and then still execute. So then it was just like mutually decided like you guys don't have the right like platform for me to grow as an analyst and individually, and then like I obviously don't want to slowly the company down, or the company feels that way, so we decided to part ways. And then I've been in the job hunt for the past couple months or so. I am actually, today was like my first day of like my new job as a senior associate for a much bigger consulting company, just doing basic onboarding stuff as I was today. Be working on one specific client for this new one. As for my previous company, I was like four different client, or, for example, four different clients touching these X amount of tools doing these things.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's so much to pick up and
Yeah.
stay on top of. I'm interested in that self-learning approach. So what are what's some of the value of self-learning that you found? Like, how are you trying to learn all these tools, but also what are some of the limitations of that?
Yeah, so I was learning all this stuff beforehand too. So I was doing like projects in Tableau, Power BI, SQL, R. So I was doing all this stuff beforehand. So I had like a basic knowledge of some of these things. And self-learning is good. I'm a big proponent of it. You got to do it. You have to touch the tool. You have to you have to touch it. You have to break it. You have to mess things up. But like doing it on like a job where like there's real stakeholders and stuff, like it's totally different. And like how to think as like an analyst is way different, instead of just like the cookie cutter courses where they're like, go through these modules, here's a data set, and then that you just like go through it. So self learning is great, but it does have its limitations. Just like business use cases in school, right? They're great, but like that's not how it really works out in the real world. So I found a lot of friction in that way, where like I was self learning this, but then I gotta come at this problem a totally another different way that I never that no course ever taught me.
Yeah, I look at it sort of like, hey, you have to learn this right now, and in 5 minutes you have to teach a class on it. And I think that can be really difficult where, hey, I'm just learning this myself, and now I have to deliver to clients based on this thing that I'm picking up right now. That's a massive, massive challenge. And, you know, there are stakes when you're dealing with clients. There are trade-offs that you have to make. And a lot of the time, in the classroom, you don't have to think about the trade-offs. One trade-off is time. We have to think, okay, this person, they want this by this deadline, but man, I have to balance the other work that I have. I have to balance learning this material so I can do a good job. There's so much more than just, hey, we have to do this work. If you're put in a situation where you don't have the familiarity with tools or certain approaches, you have to add on the learning timeline. You have to add on a lot of these other things, and that makes the scope creep incredibly far. I mean, I think that there's a massive problem with project managing data science or data analytics work because nobody ever builds in the learning time or builds in some of these other things. A lot of the things that you work on, they're not just canned examples. It's not, oh, train this model, do whatever. It's like, oh, well, I have this data and there's an issue with the data. I've talked to the data engineer. I have to do this. I have to do all these things before I can do the modeling or even build the dashboard that aren't dependent on me. And that to me can be so frustrating. but also like a realization that that's how a lot of the work is,
Yeah.
for better or for worse.
Yeah, it was a lot of drinking out of the fire hose. Kind of going off something you just said. Like in recruiter school, it was like no one ever said no, right? So it was like, okay, I can do this. But then when you get out on the streets, as we call it, that are actually trying to recruit someone, someone tells you no. It's just like, what do you mean you're
Uh,
telling me no? You're not supposed to say that. So it's like, it's like learning about it is cool, but like actually doing it and like thinking about like outside the box methods is like something like I learned fast and hard. Like I need to like, there's a lot more to this data stuff than what you see on a random course.
yeah, I mean that's something I really struggled with after school is that I could get an A in every class. You have to basically just do the work to get reasonable grades.
Yeah.
And when you get into the real world, there's no grade necessarily, right? I mean, maybe you have a performance review or those types of things, but it's not concrete and objective like a grade is, and you don't know exactly what you have to do to get that passed. And I was really lucky for my experience in, for example, playing golf or professional or like sports, is that I'd show up into to a golf tournament and there's 150 other guys there. I'm not going to win every golf tournament. I'm going to lose way more than I win. And I get used to being like, oh, like it's not always going to work out for me. I have to face some adversity. I have to be able to like be okay with, man, that didn't go as well as I'd planned. How do I do better? How do I improve? Whereas in school, you're like, well, I got an A. It's capped. Like I did perfect. There's nothing I could have done any different. And like that attitude, that philosophy, that approach does not necessarily take you as far in the real world as I would as I would like it to.
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot of lessons from my first data job, having gotten it and then having being let go. Definitely taken a lot that and I think like getting let go from your first data job. I think for me, I think for everyone, it's like an experience like you need to have. Just like yeah, it's just like experiences that you need to have. That's what I chalk it up to. Like in December, I like totally fumbled this like final client delivery for a dashboard. Like totally messed it up. I was like embarrassed. And then I just was like, after I like calmed down and got in my feelings, I was like, you know what? I was eventually gonna happen, or it's gonna happen eventually, right? You're gonna eat shit in front of a client, and just an experience I needed to have. And now that I have it, I reflect and like, all right, these are the things that went good. These are the things that went horribly wrong. Now I know for next time how to prevent things from going wrong.
Yeah, I think everyone needs one of those in their career. I was really fortunate. I had one of those pretty early. When I was in college. We had this like quarter long project that we were doing with a group, and it just went unbelievably bad. We like completely failed it. What I realized, I was like the team leader and I didn't manage the project well at all. I just expected everyone to do a high quality of work and we put it together and it just was not good.
Yeah,
And we had to present and and I it completely bombed it. I had all A's in my classes and it was the majority of the grade and I ended up getting like all C's or like
mm,
very low B's and things like that. And I was like, you know what? I'll never make that mistake again where I don't do the preparation, I don't do the work. Um, but, I think one of the beauties of this domain is there are a lot of opportunities to practice. There's a lot of opportunities if you share your work, if you do things in public, to make those mistakes before there are real consequences to them. But on the other hand, if there are real consequences, you definitely remember and you don't make those mistakes again, right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, what do you think the biggest lesson that you took away from like you and the company parting ways? You know, what do you think is the biggest thing that you're going to apply going forward?
Definitely. I'd say building on like the hard skills because they said like the soft skills. I was pretty much there with it. It's just like dealing with like ambiguous tasks, um, kind of like being able to like research on my own more, um, let's see, what else did I learn? Definitely have systems in place for myself. Like a business has a system, right? But I need to have a firmer system for myself as an analyst. So like throughout my time there, I was like saving, all right, this is how I did this in DAX. This is this SQL code to do this. So making sure I have like my own playbook and just like my own processes. Like I developed like a dashboarding checklist to make sure I hit all these things right after I like failed presenting in front of the client. So it's just setting up systems in place for me is like definitely the biggest thing. Um, and just like knowing when I was like overwhelmed. Because at that last job, it was very small, not a lot of people, and like they didn't have the learning environment or like for someone like with my set of from like my level of skills, and I just had to deal with it because that's the environment the company operates in, so they say, which is fine, but definitely like being more vocal and like speaking up like, hey, I'm kind of overloaded right now, instead of, because I like to just like not to like not ask for help, but like I like to take everything in and be like, I
Internalize a
got
little
it.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like I got it. I want to do it. It's more of like a pride thing too. Like I got it. I want to do it. I want to do a good job. I don't want to pass this off. And what else did I learn? Um, yeah, documentation, having set processes, knowing when to say no, being able to say when I'm feeling overwhelmed, making sure I ask the right questions. Just learned a lot, but those are some of like the big things that come to the top of my mind real quick.
Yeah. I mean, I think the two of the things you touched on are some of the most important things for having a successful and like kind of low stress career as much as possible. I mean, the one you mentioned about creating systems and structure and organization, I read this a long time ago, maybe like 10 years in ago in grad school. And they found that the people that were someone please fact check me on this, but the people that had the most impact or success in more traditional businesses were the ones that were the most organized, not the ones that were the smartest or the most innovative or any of these types of things. It's the people that can structure things, can prioritize well, because that's what a lot of the work is about, and in some sense, it's like, hey, your work required a lot of learning, and there wasn't uh, time necessarily built in to organize to create that environment where you can learn those new skills when you needed to develop them. The other thing is, I think transparency in work is something that I've gotten way better with over time. Like even if I have a deliverable, if I have something that I have to get in, just letting people know where I'm at in the process constantly, it usually means that they're okay with it being late or not on time. Like the biggest fear that they have is they don't know what's going on compared to it actually being late or whatever it might be. And that was a huge surprise to me. And I see that when I manage my own employees. If they tell me, hey, I can't get this out today because of XYZ, I need extra hands on this, I'm not able to do this. Um, I'm usually like totally fine. Let me know when it's going to get done, and we'll get it out there. Let me know if something changes, because being left in the dark when you expect something and it's not delivered is frustrating, because you usually tell other people, like all this stuff, and like, but it's hard as an employee to be like, oh shit, like I'm not gonna be able to get this out. Like, what do I do? And like for some reason, all of us, maybe not all of us, at least I did, I had this bias towards inaction with that, where I'm like, oh, I didn't do it. Maybe they won't notice if I don't message them or something. And they always fucking noticed.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, all that, yeah. And it's one of the things too. It's like verifying, um, like verifying like my results before I say I'm done, which is I mean it's like I think it's day one too, but like really like doing it because it's like way different like doing it for school than doing it for real. Because like I hated getting back like these numbers are off. Like I'm sure you experienced that. It's like what do you mean these numbers are off? Like, and then if I would have did like that extra thing, then I would have been able to catch something sooner.
Yeah. Well, there's also something to be said about having systems in place organizationally that help with that. I was doing a lot of my own reporting, and I would be the only one that would look at something. And to me, that's not a recipe for success, because if you have feedback, if you have accountability, then I know someone else is going to look at it and they're going to be able to tell me, like there's just a better system that like there might be things that I 100% miss. I missed something in one of my most recent deliverables, and I had to go back through it and do it over again. And it's like, well, if I had another person on my team, like merging my pull requests or doing something along those lines, like that doesn't happen as often. And so I think that there's a really cool connection between the personal infrastructure that you have, like the organization systems that you build, but your companies, you also have to build that's those structures and systems in. And I think the most successful companies are able to build that infrastructure that also merges with your personal infrastructure. And
Got
so I'm always looking to say, okay, well, I'm working on a new project. How does my system fit into this broader system that I'm a part of or that I'm going to be a part of? And like, oh, they clash. That doesn't work. Like, might have to reevaluate, or maybe it's like, hey, this isn't a good option because we don't jive, and that's okay too. But yeah, thank you for sharing about that. To me, that's something that one is hard to talk about, but two, a lot of people they just don't realize, um, you know, some of the things that could be making them successful at work, but they're just overlooking the kind of doing the work on it to save themselves time, effort, whatever it might be.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Like, yeah, like getting fired from that, like, it's not a good experience. Like, you hear people, you see all the celebration posts on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, I got a job, this and that. But no one's ever like, this is, I got let go, and this is why. These are what happened. This is what I learned from. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of express that, because I was gonna like make like a post about it all, but I was just like, I figure, let me just do if let me just do something like this instead, just to explain it all out there.
Yeah, I think also, it's happening to a lot of people. Like in this economy, in this market, with a lot of the tech companies, really good employees are being let go because some things just don't work out with the business. There's also, like there's a place where you say, hey, these are the things I could have done better, but there are also these external factors that are happening as well. And as an individual, being able to compartmentalize and say, okay, like I could have done this, and this more effectively. This would have changed a lot of outcomes. And like, hey, these three other things I could not control, and those aren't things I have to worry about. Uh, that's also something that's really important, like psychologically, when dealing with any type of adversity like this. So I think you being candid with this and being able to say, hey, like it's not like, hey, screw this company or anything like that. It's like, okay, there were things that I could have done better. I'm going to learn from that, and we're going to move on. Um, and that philosophy, I think, is something that a lot of people can really benefit from and learn from as well. And I think that's a decent segue into like some of our extracurricular activities, particularly jujitsu, because
Good stuff.
uh, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, to me, that's something that in that particular sport you face every day. Is like, okay, I know I'm going to get my butt kicked almost every time I go in the gym, and I'm going to get up with a smile because I learned something from it, from like that perceived failure of getting tapped out or getting strangled or any of those types of things. And I'm wondering, like, what impact does jujitsu have, not just on your professional life, but in your life overall? And tell me a bit about your jujitsu journey. That's also
Oh
kind
yeah.
of a cool thing.
So I guess we start. So I wrestled in high school for 2 years. I did some grappling in the Marines. I was on like the Greco team for like 6 months. I won a couple tournaments on base. They're like, come try out for the team. I just basically got my butt whooped for 6 months doing Greco. I had no Greco background. I'm like folk style more wrestling. Um, so then that was like 2015. I didn't touch the mat for like 6 years. I didn't think about it. I wasn't like involved. Then in like like a year after I started my MBA, like that summer, I had like a break, and there was like a gym like close by, and I was like, oh, let me get into jujitsu or grappling again. And they got Muay Thai. It looks fun. So I thought I was going to do that for like a month, and then 2 years later, I'm still out here doing it. So like my journey with jujitsu again, I actually would have done a jujitsu like at a base, but like military commitments, life. and just never done it. Which I'm actually glad it didn't work out because I'm glad I'm on. Because if I would have stuck it then, I would have had all the experience I've had the last 2 years. But my journey so far started in Florida. And like I got out of the Marines, I put on like 40 pounds, or not being a recruiter, you kind of get away with being a little fatter, not in shape because you just gotta make the numbers. Just gotta hit the quotas. But yeah, I put on like, I was like about 200 ish, and I'm pretty short. So, and I was like, I wasn't like stocky. I was pretty bloated. I see pictures of videos of myself from 2 years ago, and I was like, whoa, what was that? So like my journey, I, let's say I'll start here, like November 2021. I did like my first tournament in like years. I took first place in gi, took third in no gi, and then at that point I was just like, I think I can really be good at this jujitsu stuff. Like, not saying I'll be like ADCC world champion, but like I realized, like, I was 29 at the time. I realized like I had, or no, I was 30 at the time. I have like my athletic career to do the things I want to do. Like, I only have a short window, right? So early 30s to mid to late 30s. So like I want to be really good at this thing. So like my journey is from there. So I moved around a couple times. I'm still a white belt, but for what jujitsu has done for me personally, it's like, it's kind of, first of all, it's like a community, right? Which I'm sure you've experienced as well. It's like jujitsu reminds me of the Marines. The type of stuff you hear and the type of people you interact with, and it's like the same structure, right? Like you're doing something tough with other people, you come together, community, right? So it had that, and it just kind of gave me like my warrior spirit back. It kind of gave me like, my gritness and like aggressive and like my intensity back, because I was just like work and school, kind of lifting every now and again. I was back home in Fort Lauderdale, so I was going out a lot, brunches and nightlife, and it just gave me like more of that. Jiu-jitsu like put it. I was like missing something that I had lost from being out of the military, but it kind of like brought it back for me. Like now I'm training, like, how many times am I training now? Like at least twice on Monday. Well, now that I'm starting this new job, my schedule will have to shift, but I'm at least doing like 5 or 6 sessions a week. I'm trying to lift twice a week. I'm trying to do kickboxing once. Um, and so overall, like jujitsu is just kind of just like, it filled in discipline in areas where I had lost or I was lacking of. And it gave me like, I feel like it gave me like purpose again. Like, I'm going to go do this tough thing. I'm going to get better at this thing. And, there's nothing like jujitsu, right? Like some days you're the hammer, and like some days you're the nail.
Some
And
days you're the nail.
yeah, and like I was the nail Monday, and yeah. So I don't know. I sorry, I was just rambling with all that. I don't know where you want to go from
No,
there.
no, I love it. That's exactly what, a lot of the things that you feel are the same that I feel, is that there's this space that I can go into where, one, I get exercise, which is really important. Two, I get to know myself and I get to understand, like my physical limitations, but as well as like, like my ego and those types of things. Like, no one can go into a jiu-jitsu gym and keep their ego unless they're like Gordon Ryan, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to get, if you've never trained before and you walk into a gym, somebody in there is going to get you. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be well, maybe if you're one of those like strongest man people and you're 700 pounds, that might be a little slightly different story. But
Easy day.
yeah. Um, but I also love that I can go and be friends with and connect with people that I wouldn't meet in my day-to-day life. You can have a data scientist like me go in and like choke out a police officer, right? And, like completely different walks of life, still really good friends. You're on the mat. It's a place where like every one of these people could come together and you share something that is physical, but also I think a very neat intellectual pursuit. And I also think that there's levels to it. I mean, the way I view jujitsu is probably very different from some college kid, you know? And I'm like doing freaking equations in my head when they're just like, hey, I'm just going to put my hands on this guy's
Right.
lapel and choke him out. But we can be equally as effective. But there's some of this like jockeying. If there's like no one way to get better at jujitsu, it's like an infinite problem to solve, and I love those types of problems. And I
Yeah.
also, I can't stress enough how valuable it's been in my day-to-day life, especially managing my emotions. I get in a meeting and I'm like, oh, I can't stand this person that I'm talking to or something like that. That very rarely happens, but it's like, if I can hold off getting choked by my professor for like this amount of time, like I can handle this, right? Where
Yeah.
I like have real life threatening things going my way or a threat of injury. Like there's nothing that is as intimidating as that, right?
Yeah. I knew like when I like first did that tournament, like I didn't just want to be one of those guys that like just go to class and hear some technique and just like you do that over and over again. Like I said, like I knew I really wanted to be good, and it kind of gave me like it kind of like bleeds into like analytics somewhat, so we can talk about like how like I mix those two. But it just like yeah, I don't know, man. Jiu-jitsu just like it just like filled like a void for me. Like I didn't know that was there, and like it's just like I say like overall confidence, right? Like I'm like not that I know I can't kick everybody's ass, but like I can fight. Like I'm not like I'm like I'm not afraid. Like I just feel like a warrior again when you step out on the mats and you just like you're going out there and it's just like and kind of like you said, like if you can avoid getting submitted or you're getting smashed, it's like what's some meeting that someone's flipping out about a dashboard about, right? Like, there's more important. I mean, that's important too, but
Yeah.
like you're being calm. Like, it's like, cause like if you're like, cause the other day, like, I was like traveling and I just got back to class and I was just like really like going hard and like just trying to beat up everybody and like I got caught in an arm bar at literally the last second of the round and I was freaking pissed. I was like just for like a second and he was like, "Hey, look, I know you got a lot of stuff going on. You're thinking of like I know your jujitsu right now is like you have a lot of stuff going on in your head, but you need to remember like you need to slow it down. Like I can't out hustle everybody is what my professor said. He was like, well, he says you can, but you don't need to out hustle everybody. So you need to understand like when it's time to smash and pressure and when it's time to go.
Yeah, I like that. I think that that's also something really interesting is that when you get better at jiu-jitsu, um, or when I face people that are better, it feels like they're doing everything super slow. And I'm like, how the hell did I get got with that? And it's so frustrating. But there's something in everything, in data and in public speaking and all these things where once you reach a certain level of aptitude, it starts to look effortless. And I think that there's something that that I always strive towards or aspire to is that whenever I do a podcast, um, whenever I present on stage, whenever I'm in a meeting, if it's like, wow, this person, like they were meant to do this, all this stuff. It's like, no, I practiced my ass off. I've done 150 podcast episodes. I've been in all these meetings. I've done 700, 1,000 roles in my lifetime, whatever it might be. It's like, no, wait till you see when I turn it on. I think that that's like the idea that,
Definitely. And like where we get in trouble a lot, like in jujitsu, it's like when we're going too fast, then you get caught. Or like in data in our work, like we bang out this code or this report and there's mistakes all over it. Like so it's like it's always like when you're going too fast is when you make the most mistakes, not when you're like when you have composure.
yeah, one of my favorite sayings, I think it's a military saying actually, is slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yep.
Um, and that always sticks with me, and it's particularly in jujitsu because like if you do it slowly and effectively once, or you bait them in the right way and you hit them just like wait till their weight's in the right spot and you like sweep them, it doesn't have to be like it just has to be timed right.
Yeah.
And then to the other person, it'll feel like what the hell just happened. That it was like this, and I see that in my work too. If I do it really meticulously and right the first time, then I don't have to review it as much. Then I don't have to go back through it, and it becomes so much more seamless overall.
Well,
So I'm go ahead.
no, I was saying like one last point on that. Like something that my professor brought up a couple weeks ago is like we just talking to everybody. It's like when we're drilling these movements, like it needs to be like he kind of did like some math or some point system. It's like when you're doing these moves, you need to drill it 10 out of 10 perfect every single time because there's going to be a day in the room in competition, hopefully not on the streets, where your arm whatever you're doing needs to be like someone's going to do it or stop you at like a level 6 or 7, right, for their ability. You need to be able to beat that. Like you need to be 10 out of 10 as close as possible, like to perfect every single time. There's going to be a time where you like, let's say you've been drilling at 70%. Someone just needs to stop you, and they've been practicing defending at 80%. And they're going to win. So, however, that logic he said, and that really stuck with me, right? Like, so literally, I'm drilling like triangles, for example, like we're doing, or back takes, for example, like literally by the numbers, step by step, going slow, getting my grips right, getting my positions right, getting my footing right. Because then when I notice, like when I'm doing it live, like it's not like perfect, but it's a lot better than if I just like lackadaisical rush through it drilling onto the next rep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't get all your reps in practice right, how are you gonna
Yeah.
do it right against an opponent who's actually defending you? I
Yeah.
find that as a really interesting one. And like I look into the same thing when I review people's projects for data. When I look at people's work, if in your own personal GitHub you can't get it right, you're not commenting your code, you're doing these little things. What makes me think that in the real world you're going to be able to do that effectively as well?
Yeah.
It's something to be said about you know uh, another stupid idiom that I like is uh, you do everything how you do anything, which I find really really
Yeah.
powerful. So, if you're doing, if I half-ass brushing my teeth, the probability that I half-ass doing any other thing is probably higher. Like people who are perfectionists or want to be the best at what they do, they carry that onto everything, and it also carries over to everything, right? So if I wake up, I make my bed, I do my focused meditation or whatever the hell I do in the morning. If I do those to the best of my ability, hell, I bet you that like all the other shit that actually matters will probably be done pretty well. Um, and I admittedly I lose sight of this all the time. I half-ass a lot of things, but it's important to kind of strive towards an ideal.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, and it's always little things that bite you in the ass. Like, it's never the big things for the most part. It's always the little stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to talk a little bit more about merging analytics with
Yep.
jujitsu. So, you're doing that in a pretty unique way. You also have this concept of a forever project that I really like and I want to dive into. Let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit.
Yeah, so starting with like my whole like really wanting to be good at jujitsu thing. So like my Notion app, well Notion it's not my app, I wish, but like Notion the app, the note taking app. After every roll, after every training session, or the next morning, I document like what I learned, who I rolled with, how I did. And then on top of that, I have a little table like I count the rolls, my hours, so on and so forth, right? So I'd say like last summer or right before that, before I moved to Kansas City, I was talking with my old professor, and I was like, hey man, like I got this idea for data and jujitsu. I like them both. What do you think? And he like kind of gave me some ideas, and I was like, huh, okay. So like then I started doing projects with my jujitsu data, right? So like my tournament data, not really my. I don't record my rolls at practice because like recording that and like taking notes and like annotating it for some sort of data capture, it would just get to be too much, right? So the only thing I capture for like my personal roles is like my main KPIs I care about is like submissions, win loss, win percentages, and submissions that I win by. So then as I was like toying with like how do I mix the data and jujitsu, right? So like what do people try to make money off for jujitsu? Seminars. No one's gonna come to a seminar for me. I don't have the interest to make swag or gear or clothes. no clue where to start, anything like that. No one's gonna come to me for privates. I'm still a white belt. So how can I? What is missing? Well, what I notice is like no one is offering data like services for jujitsu. Like I've seen like others like where black belts like send videos, will comment. It's kind of like a coaching thing, but no one's like offering like, hey, you send me your videos from your tournament. These are all your rolls. This is how much time you spent on bottom. This is how many takedowns you attempted or got. This is how many times you got your guard pass. This is how many like it took you 5 submission attempts to get one. Like no one's capturing numbers in that ways. So I figured, well, that's my way in, right? That's how I can, and that's how Substats was born. So essentially, Substats is a jiu-jitsu analytics company that I started almost a year ago, a couple months ago. I'm the head data strangler, pretty much the only one. That's my job title, data strangler. Someone commented that on LinkedIn, and I was like, that's it. So I'm the data strangler for that. And then what I do is I find other jiu-jitsu athletes. I haven't found much of them to be honest. I haven't really made any money from it yet. It's a work in progress. We'll get there one day. So essentially, what I do is like let's say Ken, you wanted me to analyze your videos. You go through my process where like you sign up, drop it in a Dropbox. I look at your videos, and then I just analyze pretty much just basically in Excel, and I build reports and dashboards from there. And essentially, I don't want to. I stay away from technique because I who am I to tell anybody about technique, right? I'm just going to say, hey, this is what the data, this is what your moves and numbers are showing me. Um, yeah,
That's fascinating. So I am the person that records all their roles and looks at them. And I think that there's such an oversight in jujitsu now about how to use the analytics. Even simple things where you look at where most finishes happen with essentially rear naked choke or heel hooks in no-gi. And, how much time do you spend drilling those things in a normal class? At least in a lot of the schools I've been to, fairly rarely. But it's like, wow, if those are the positions where most matches are ending, shouldn't most of our work be focused on getting to the back and also finishing rear naked chokes or getting into positions where you can set up and attack legs or whatever it might be? And I think that there's such, I think New Wave probably does that pretty well. I mean, you look at how a lot of their guys are finishing, but it's few and far between. I think sports in general, but maybe even more so jiu-jitsu, are pretty old school. And there's so much opportunity to reevaluate how jujitsu is taught and structured and curriculum wise. I also think I when I train, I take all these videos and I look at them and I'm like, wow, that's not at all what I thought I looked like. And to me, that's so shocking. Is that the feel and reality are so disparate when it comes to the sport or any sport. I mean, that would happen to me when I started playing golf. I look at my swing video all the time, and you're like, oh, it actually wasn't in the position that it feels like it's in. How do I match those two things, the reality to what I'm doing? Or like, oh, I thought I was doing this, like with my when I'm trying to retain guard, but I'm actually not. My foot's like not getting over. I'm not like circling my foot in or whatever it might be. And it's like, dang, there's so much information there that could make people better. But a lot of people are just like, well, I'm going to go to class, I'm going to roll, I'm going to do whatever the professor's teaching today. And then people like you are just stomping them because they're limited in what they're seeing and are able to grow. And yeah, jujitsu is such a cool problem because it's so individualized, right? I
yeah,
mean, my game is probably very different from your game. Maybe not that different because we both kind of come from a wrestling background, and but it's still, I digress. There's so much opportunity. I'd love to see more people leverage it.
yeah. And that's the thing I've been having a problem with is because a lot of people are like, I'm just gonna go to class and train hard, Bohala, whatever. And it's like there's not a lot of interest in like me having analyze your data. Like I'm not doing it to like quit my day job or anything like that. It's just like more of like a hobby to kind of try to make some money eventually. But that's his problem too. It's like an education piece. It's like, I'm talking to jujitsu people that work or come from very different backgrounds or not. I've only met a couple people that are into data, like we are. I mean, everyone else just does different things. So it's like two challenges, right? It's like explaining to people what it is and then educating them on why it's important. So like, and then like a lot of people just go to class and train, and they don't put that much thought into it, and they never really have an interest for services like mine, which is okay. But I mean, not everyone's gonna want to buy your thing, but it's just, yeah, it's so much that you can do in jujitsu, and like you have to worry about so many different things. Like you can be practicing back escapes all week, but then you get caught in a triangle. It's like now I gotta think about that stuff again,
Evolve the
right?
meta. Yeah. Exactly. Well, so you also mentioned to me there's something really cool about this project is that, hey, you're focusing a lot of attention to it, but it's also building out something that is essentially a portfolio.
Yep, forever portfolio.
And, you described it as the forever portfolio. Can you dive into that concept a little bit more for me?
Yeah, so like getting into data, what did they say? Make projects, share it, like, comment, have a portfolio, this and that. And like I feel like that's cool, like breaking into the industry, but like I'm just gonna be blunt about it. Like, how freaking long do I gotta make projects and do portfolios and share and GitHub and Tableau Public? Like, I don't want to do that forever, right? I'm sure, like, once people get into their careers, like a lot of people at my last company, they didn't even have project portfolios. Like, they've been doing it for so long. So, like, to them, like, who cares? But for me, it's like this kind of does two things. It's like it's essentially is a portfolio. Like it's my own. Like I'm mixing data and jujitsu, and it's something I can talk about continuously because I'm going to keep doing it instead of like finding data sets and building random dashboards for these different courses or what have you. Like this is like this little side data hustle thing that I have is my portfolio, and I'll use that to talk about that for what I do as I progress in my career, as I go to interviews, as I switch jobs, and so on and so forth.
I think that's such a great idea because a lot of the work that you do, you can't share.
Yeah,
Oh, I work for this other company. I can't show you the project. I can't show you the code. I can't show you all these things. But this is something, one, you're going to work on, as you mentioned, forever. It's fun. You do it because you enjoy it. And two, it actually has upside, right? You can make it a business. You can help people. You can do all these things. And I'm surprised more people don't treat their projects like this. Like I tell people to do 3 or 4 projects as sort of a baseline. But if you have one really good project where you're blowing everyone out of the water and they're excited about what you're doing and it clearly has market value, even if the value is just for yourself, that's plenty. That can be enough to land you a job. I think Nick Singh, who's been on the podcast, he landed his first job because he made it was like a rapper clout betting platform or something along those lines, or a music popularity betting platform. And that was his main project, right? And like these are things that almost uniformly people are going to be excited about. And hell, if they love jujitsu, like auto jobs. So uh,
yeah. I cannot tell you like, well, out of all the interviews I've done or like talking to recruiters, like everyone's like your jujitsu portfolio. Like Brian Julius, he's a pretty big Power BI guy. He works at Enterprise DNA. He's like he uses my story like all the time. He's like a pretty big guy
hell
in the
yeah.
data world. So shout out to him. But like he says he uses mine as a personal example. It's like every time like I've talked about jujitsu stuff in like an interview or anything, like I want to confidently say like that person will remember me, whether I didn't get the job or I didn't. Even for my last job, like I live coded with like one of the founders like some SQL query about my jujitsu data. It's like how can you make this query better? And like we did that live, and it's just like, and I think like jujitsu has gotten me some careers. Not it has gotten me careers, but like just like showcasing like skills. Like all right, I coded this in R, showing these skills, or in SQL and these skills, but with my own data. And I guess that kind of turns into like learning too, because like I can watch a course right now, LinkedIn Learning, whatever, I got it. But like I felt like I wanted to learn concepts, and I was like how to do joins, for example, in SQL. Like sure, I can learn it from this course, but like here's like I'm joining like my matches to like my tournament table, right? So like for me, that like ingrained it more in my head, and it's just like cool to talk about because like I've talked to other buddies that are hiring managers, and they're like, how many times I need to see some Titanic data set or this random sales dashboard? It's like, if you show a portfolio like someone was a rugby player, so like kind of similar thing, like they had a data set, a project about their love for rugby, and that will get you noticed than just having just like a random project about healthcare, in my opinion.
You know, in your opinion, I think that that's something that people don't realize about their passions is if you're really leaning into something that's contagious, other people appreciate that, but it also gives you a focus. So many people are like, I don't know what to do projects on, I don't know what to build out, I don't know a lot of these things. And to me, it's like, well, just do something you're excited about. You're going to work harder on it, you're going to experiment more, people are going to want to hear about it more because you're excited about talking about it. I mean, that's something that every single guest, and I'm pretty sure I've told you this, is that I have one requirement for the podcast, and that's that we talk about things that you're excited about because
Yeah,
that's contagious to the viewers. That's what people want to listen to. They don't want, nobody wants the person to come into a job interview and for them to talk about the projects that they're bored to death with and that they just did so that people will look at them, right? They want you to come in and be like, oh, I did this for my jiu-jitsu matches. I'm so excited because of XYZ. I saw that I was, like losing in these positions. So it was actionable. I got to train in this different way. That's what people are about. They want the story. They want that interaction with people. And if you can show that you have that passion or that excitement, then it really helps with your job search. It also helps you on the job. Like if you're excited about whatever the company's doing, you're going to crush it.
like I even noticed like when I've talked about my jujitsu projects, like I obviously know all about it, so I can speak to it. But when I've done like presented other projects and interviews like about other stuff, it's like I was like a struggle. Not as like I mean I could have prepared more and and like went over it better, but like it was a bit of more of a struggle because like all right, what was the stupid Jeep Tableau dashboard about? Okay, sure, these are my insights. But if it was my jujitsu stuff, like I'm here all day talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, so to anyone listening, I think the overarching message is just lean in to what you're excited about. If it's jujitsu, if it's like your favorite anime show, it doesn't matter if you're stoked about it. That's contagious. People will realize, and you'll do significantly better project work.
Definitely.
Um, Abe, those are all my questions. Do you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom? How can people learn more about you?
Um, I'm big on LinkedIn, Instagram as well. If you also do jujitsu and want some of your data analyzed, hit me up too. Yeah, no final questions or anything. I actually have to do a veterans. Well, actually, one thing, I'm a part of the Veterans Advocacy Tableau user group, which we host, monthly meetings about different data projects. Al is our next host, so I got to get ready for that in like
Let's go.
20 minutes or so. But nothing for me so far. Thank you, Ken, for everything. I appreciate it, man. This was fun. Glad we could chat jujitsu, data, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I had a blast as well.